everyone, welcome to Two Car Pros. My name is Ryan and today we're going to show you how to replace the spark plugs for a 2014 3.5 liter EcoBoost Ford F-150. So Ford put these 3.5 liter EcoBoosts in from 2011 to today. They're still in production and I am 90% certain that the newer trucks use the exact same configuration, spark plug, and process of the model year before the current one, which is the 2011 to 2014. In 2015, they did a redesign. I think it was actually a refresh, not a complete redesign. So a couple of things are different, but basically everything in the powertrain is exactly the same. I think it makes a little bit more power, but the spark plug design is the same. So removing and replacing them is the same. Before we go any further, I also want to point out that all data mentions that you should be doing this on a truck engine that is warm, not hot, and not cool. And I know that's a little unscientific for people that really want to be correct. Basically, on the all data printout, it says that you should be able to put your hand against the cylinder head and hold it there, but it shouldn't be cold either. It needs to kind of be in a warm, sweet spot. If you don't do that, the threads actually have a chance of becoming damaged, and then, well, you're either putting a helicoil in or replacing the head, and I don't think you want to do either of those things. So just wait until the engine is warm to the touch, but not hot and not cold. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump in. So the first thing we need to do is remove this engine cover piece. We can start by removing our oil cap here because it's all kind of connected. And then with this piece, you just want to pull straight up like that, and then shimmy it out like that. Perfect. Before we go any further though, go ahead and replace the oil cap so nothing gets down in there. And for this little piece of foam insulation, what we can do is just pull straight up on it. Just like that. Before we start removing spark plugs or anything, what we can do is grab some compressed air and blow all around where the spark plugs live, just to make sure we don't get any dirt and debris in the combustion chamber. So we're going to start with cylinder number 1 here. And what we're going to do is unplug the coil. So what we have to do is grab a small implement, pull back on the red safety tab, just like that. Perfect. And then we can push down on the gray part of the safety, where the end of my finger is, and just wiggle that plug off. Fantastic. So in order to gain access to the bolt, we can just kind of move the line to the side, grab an 8mm socket. They're not on terribly tight, and remove that bolt. Now we can remove the ignition coil. And with these, you just want to be careful and kind of wiggle it back and forth because you don't want to shred the boot or anything on the end. And we can remove that ignition coil. You can say way down in there is our spark plug. So now we can grab our 5/8 spark plug socket and put that down there on the plug itself. And what you want to do is make sure that it is fully seated on the spark plug nut, so make sure you're not going to round that off, and then we can go ahead and remove it. I'll do that right now. Spray some carb spray down. So I got a little bit longer extension there. We can go ahead and remove those. And if you're having a really hard time and it's really tough turning it, go ahead and spray some carb spray down in there and let it sit for a little while. Help you loosen up those threads for you, and it'll evaporate off and it won't hurt anything. It's also important to note, never ever use power tools when you're working with spark plugs. Even for the extraction, don't use power tools. Always use hand tools. It is the better option. Go ahead and remove that spark plug. There we go. And now I can compare it to my new one. Alrighty, here is our new spark plug, our new coil boot. And I want to say that it is recommended that you replace these boots. So here's the part number for that, link down below in the description. And they just pry off pretty easy, just like that. I'm just going to take a bit of dielectric grease, link down below in the description. Just a smidgen in there. And then replace the boot with this nice new one. Very cool. I also want to put some dielectric grease on the spark plug side of our coil. And don't worry about pushing it down or anything, because when it goes on top of the spark plug, that will push it down perfectly. So I like to leave it just like that. We can set that aside. And then we can talk about our spark plugs. There is our part number, linked down below in the description. Now these are special spark plugs. They're the Ford Iridium spark plugs, and they are non-adjustable. You can't adjust this tip, this Iridium tip, because you can actually damage it. So if it's out of spec, I think it's 30 thousandths, I'll put it on screen if I find it, you just have to replace it. And the reason why I would trust this right out of the box is because it does come with this sheath that prevents any kind of accidental bumping. So this is most likely ready to rock. A good practice to be into is, if you're wearing a pair of gloves, is to just go around the porcelain like this. It's just made of glass, so it can crack very easily, and if that is the case, you can get misfires because the electricity isn't going where it's supposed to be going. So if there's a crack, you should be able to feel it, but this one feels absolutely perfect. And then I'm gonna grab some aluminum anti-seize. And don't go crazy with the anti-seize, just a smear is good. Just like that. That is plenty, and you can even smear it around with your finger if you like. Gets right in those threads, very good. And now we can replace this. So we can load up our spark plug socket and take it back over to the truck. All right, with our spark plug loaded up, we can gingerly put it into our spark plug well, into the threads, and we're gonna do this by hand because we don't want to cross thread, and you'd be able to feel that better if you just use your hand here, and then make sure to not crack any porcelain when you're removing that spark plug socket either. So now I'm going to grab our torque implement, and our torque spec for today is 133 inch-pounds. Very light. I think that works out to about 11 foot-pounds. There we go. And look, I'm already at 80, 70. Getting close. And there we go. That is all the tightness you need. Not very tight at all. And when you're removing the spark plug socket, be very ginger. You don't want to bonk the porcelain. Carefully removed, very nice. So now we can put our ignition coil back in, and we're just gonna drop that straight in, just like that, perfect. You can walk that bad boy in, just like that. There we go. Grab our 8mm socket, and we're just going to snug that up wrist tight. Honestly, these are just 8mm bolts. They're just holding the ignition coil in place. Don't go crazy. You can snap them off really easily. That's all I'm going to give it, just a little snugging. And then we can grab the connector for the ignition coil. Slide it on like that. Very easy. So you hear that nice gratifying clicking sound, and then push this red connector, this little, not connector, but it's a little safety into the connector, and now this connector can't walk its way out. So the really cool thing about spark plugs, especially on these V6 trucks, is there's only 6 of them, so just do the same exact thing for number 2. Number 3 might give you a little bit of a challenge because of these heater hoses, but because the truck is cool, there's no pressure, you can move them around pretty decently. You know, you don't want to snap these little connectors or anything, so be ginger, just move them out of the way about that much. You shouldn't have a problem. It's exactly the same. The driver's side's even easier. There's really nothing in the way. There's your ignition coil, there's your other one, that's number 5 there, and number 6 on there in the back. So really nothing too bad in the way there. So the only issue I found with doing the number 6 spark plug is this little electrical connector way back here. You need to unplug that, and it might be a little tricky to find at first, but the release is where my pointer finger is, and you just pull up and you can wiggle the connector back. That's what it looks like on the bottom, and then you can just stow that away, and now you have perfect access to doing number 6 there. Alright, all 6 done. Not too bad at all. There really wasn't anything in the way except for that electrical connector, which you just push right back on. It clicks very gratifyingly into place, and you're all good to go. All the 6 were very easy, very straightforward. Even these back ones back here, you can just move those heater hoses out of the way slightly. They're made of rubber, very pliable. And with all that out of the way, we can go ahead and put the engine cover back on. And we can replace this foam piece, and there's really no fastener for it. It just kind of fits down on there and sits there. It's held in with the engine cover piece. So on the engine cover, this piece here has to go back into a clip at the back of the top of the intake manifold. And then these little rubber domes just go on top of little bulbs that stick up, and it just goes back down onto there. It's really easy. See, way back there, those 2 hooks that is where we're going to aim those round pieces on the engine cover piece. And then we gotta take the oil cap off to put the cover back on. Then we can put our engine cover back on, aiming those round pieces into those two hooks. There we go. Make sure those rubber domes are in their home, just pressing down like this. Very good. And then our final step is to replace our oil cap. There we go. And then with the vehicle in park, we can go ahead and start the engine to make sure, well, it starts and doesn't misfire. And there we go. Sounds like it's running like a top. So no misfires and no long cranks or anything. This repair is done. So that's how to replace your spark plugs in a 2014 3.5 liter EcoBoost Ford F-150. I believe this also applies to all 3.5 liter EcoBoosts. It is pretty easy, honestly. It's only 6 plugs, which is kind of nice. And they are a whole heck of a lot easier than, say, a 2004 or 2005 5.4 liter 3-valve F-150, which unfortunately I own. This was actually on a buddy's truck of mine, and it was pretty easy. Honestly, again, you only have 6 plugs and they're pretty darn easy to get to, and they're not in, you know, crazy tight, and they don't have a history of breaking off as long as you do the things I said in the video and go slow and take your time. I also want to go over how much money you're going to be saving doing this job on your own. Now, a traditional tune-up on a vehicle like this is probably going to cost you, if you take it to a normal shop, maybe $300, $250, $300, depends on where you live. I live in Southern California, so things are crazy expensive no matter what you do, so take that with a grain of salt. Now, for the plugs and the boots that we put in today, it was only about $100, so you're saving about 3 times what you'd normally pay. And if you take it to the dealer, well, all bets are off. That sky's the limit at the dealer. So you could be saving hundreds and hundreds of dollars by doing this pretty simple repair yourself, and you know the job's done correctly. You know, they didn't just take 2 plugs out and say, yep, we did them. And it is like crazy important to do the spark plug service on these vehicles, especially these 3.5 liter EcoBoost, because carbon fouling is such an issue. So what happens is the carbon builds up on the spark plug, and it's really tough to push spark through carbon because it doesn't conduct electricity. It doesn't let that spark go where it needs to go. So the coil has to work really hard in order to push that spark through. And if the coil works really hard for an extended period of time, well, it stops working, and then you develop misfires and intermittent misfires and all kinds of different problems and check engine lights you don't want to deal with. Preventative maintenance is the key on these 3.5 liters. All applicable links are located down below in the description. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you next time.